Hey everybody, Darkclaw here. Well, I decided to do a video of my PlayStation 2 collection. Now, I have done a video before talking about my collections in the past. I did that a while back where I showed every game in my collection, but well, I thought it'd be good to just give a detailed look at each game I have and give my thoughts about them. And also because my collection has seen quite an update since. So, without further ado, let's get started. I have a lot of games to show, so I may have to split this into a couple of parts. Let's get to it. First, I have Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. It's a decent game. Played this a few times. It's basically just your average run-of-the-mill license game. Decent gameplay. It's a hack and slash kind of game, sort of. It's okay. It's not great, but it's not terrible. It's just painfully average. God of War, the original. I got pretty far into this game, but unfortunately, I ended up getting stuck because I saved at a point where I was at extremely low health and low magic. So I was unable to finish the game because of it, and I couldn't find any sort of health items or health orbs lying around. And trying to fight an enemy was kind of futile at that point because I couldn't really kill the bastard because there was a big one in the way. And, well, I can't really fight like that without pulling some serious rabbits out of my ass or some. But I did enjoy this game. I think the first game is still pretty fun, but it's certainly aged a bit in comparison to the later games. But the first game is still pretty good, though. Next, I have Tomb Raider Legend, which I enjoyed. I thought this was pretty good. Probably my favorite entry in the pre-reboot saga, along with Tomb Raider 2, which I also really enjoyed. Legend is pretty fun. It's not very long. It's a pretty short game, but a really enjoyable one, though. I enjoyed it. Max Payne, which I haven't gotten too far in, but from what I have played, I really enjoyed it. I think it's a fun little third-person shooter with a pretty neat neo-noir, gritty comic book style. Pretty cool. Bullet time also is pretty neat, so yeah. Next I have Hot Shots Golf 3. Yeah, there's a bunch of stickers on it, which I honestly can't say a lot of because my disc is not really in the best shape. The game keeps constantly freezing on me, so I'm basically unable to play this all the way through. Yeah, it looks terrible. There's this huge ass scratch right here. It's terrible. From what I have played of it, though, I like it, but not as much as the sequel HSG4. But from what I have played, it's pretty good, but that's all I can really say because I don't have too much of an opinion on this due to a bad disc. State of Emergency, which is another Rockstar published game. This one is a beat 'em up where you go around different areas and just beat the living shit out of a bunch of various enemies. Like, you get to beat the shit out of cops, you get to beat the shit out of punks, just a bunch of random ass people going around doing crazy shit. It is a really fun game. It's a little clunky, but I still enjoy this one, though. It's pretty damn good for what it is. It wasn't a very expensive game either. I got it for like $8, so not too bad. Not too bad for a $8 game. Hot Shots Golf 4, which I played the shit out of when I was a kid, and I still play this every now and then. I do love this game. This is a fantastic golf game. Really not a lot I hate about this game, honestly. Maybe a couple of terrible stages, but other than that, I really enjoy this game. It's incredibly fun. The characters are hilarious. and it's just a really enjoyable game. It's always fun to see where you stand on the scoreboard. It's kind of nice. I used to play it online quite a bit as well. Really fun game. Capcom Classics Collection Volumes 1 and 2. I'm a huge fan of classic Capcom arcade games. So, of course, this was going to be a must-own for my collection. Of course, a majority of these games are now on the Arcade Stadium collection on the Switch, or it's also on PS4, I think, but I have it on Switch. But it has games like Forgotten Worlds, Bionic Commando, 1943, 1942, Street Fighter 2, Ghosts and Goblins, Legendary Wings, Section Z, and all that stuff. I think it has Commando as well. Yeah, Commando and Gunsmoke, which actually Arcade Stadium on Switch doesn't have, which I was really surprised about. This one does though. And Volume 2 is pretty good, which has stuff like Magic Sword, Super Street Fighter 2, Knights of the Round, a bunch of other stuff. There's some really good games here. I do think the first one has a slightly stronger library, but the second one does have its fair share of great content, especially Magic Sword, which is actually one of my favorite Capcom arcade games. No, not a bad collection at all. I think they're both really good. Next, I have Dragon Quest VIII, which I haven't put too much time in. From what I have played of it, I did like it, but that's all I can really say about it. I have limited time for RPGs, but I am trying to put more time into them these days. Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow, which is a really good game. I actually really like the Splinter Cell games. Out of all the Tom Clancy game franchises, Splinter Cell has to be my favorite, followed by Rainbow Six. Splinter Cell is just a really fun series with realistic physics, but just incredibly fun stealth-based gameplay, and Pandora Tomorrow just further expands upon the groundwork that the first game laid, so yeah, great game. Very fun. Devil May Cry 2. It's not very good. I like the first one. I thought it was pretty good, but the second game is pretty watered down. It feels very dull in comparison. It's a game that should have been good, but it wasn't. It could have been so much better, but it was just a very dull, unremarkable sequel. Thankfully, the third game fixed everything. Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX 2, which is basically just Tony Hawk, but on BMX bikes, and it's a pretty fun game. All I can really say about it. It has a really good soundtrack, though. It's got Bad Brains, Iggy Pop, stuff like that. Good stuff. Katamari Damacy, very fun game. I absolutely love it. It's weird as hell, and that's what I love about it. It's just incredibly fun to play. Just a great soundtrack, an absolutely hilarious kind of style to it. It's just so good. Ace Combat 5, The Unsung War, which is a pretty fun flight sim, or, well, I'm not sure if a sim would be accurate, but a pretty good flight game, though. I really enjoy this, although I haven't played it as much as Ace Combat 4, which I love, but 5 is still a damn good game, though. Twisted Metal Black, which is one of my favorite games on the system. I love this game to death. I mean, vehicular combat, blowing shit up. What more could you want? It has a bit of a darker and grittier atmosphere to it, but I do like that it doesn't take itself too seriously. It just tries to make things a little bit crazier and a little more unhinged, and I don't mind it. I mean, the game doesn't try to take itself seriously, so thankfully it's not like super try-hardy or super edgy and stuff. Maybe a little edgy, but it's not like trying to be anything more than what it is. So yeah. Onimusha 3, Demon Siege. I haven't played this one yet. I've played the first two, but I have not played 3 yet. I will get around to it. Next, I have Army Men Green Rogue, which is not very good. It's a pretty unremarkable arcade-like shooter. Just just not that great. The game doesn't look too bad, but the gameplay is pretty slow. And it's also really easy. Like, this game is pretty damn easy. It's extremely linear, which would be fine, but unfortunately, the game is just really dull, and it takes, like, I don't know, a couple of hours to finish. And, well, it would have been fine if it was, if it wasn't boring, but unfortunately, this game is pretty damn boring. And I love arcade shooters, but this just ain't it. Um, it's just really lackluster. The weapons don't feel very satisfying. Um, it's extremely easy to play through. There's really not much penalty. It's not great. Unless you're an Argument fan, I wouldn't recommend getting it. The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. This one is actually really good. I'm not joking. This is a very solid game. It is basically a Power Stone Smash Brothers clone, where you get to play as various characters from the show. Billy, Mandy, Grimm, Hoss, Delgado, Irwin, and Nurgle, and some others. I can't remember who else. But it actually is pretty good. It plays fun. It plays pretty well. It's quite fun to play. It looks great. This game is just overall really solid, and it captures the show's sense of humor quite well, which I love. I was a huge fan of the show growing up, so it was nice to have this in my collection. The Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning. I know a lot of people hate this game. I remember liking it, but I have not played this game in a long time, so I don't really know what I think of it now. I think the last time I played it was when I was like 17 or so. God of War 2, which I love. One of my favorite entries in the God of War series. So much fun to play, even more fun, even better than the first. Great gameplay, great music, just a classic. Damn good game. ATV Off-Road Fury 3, which I played a ton of when I was younger. I loved this game to death. I still think it's a great game, but I'm definitely shit at it now. Wow. Like, I totally suck ass at this game compared to when I played this back when I was a kid. It's still fun, though. I still enjoy the game. Next game I got is Freedom Fighters, which I just recently picked up. And from what I played, it's a pretty good third-person shooter. I like it quite a bit. Gran Turismo 4. I enjoyed this one, but not quite as much as 3. I think my biggest issue with it is that the game's controls just feel a little bit overly sensitive, which I know it's a racing game, but it feels more oversensitive than it really needs to be, and the enemy AI is ruthless, like aggressive AF. Now, I don't necessarily mind hard AI, it's just the problem is GT3 had such damn near perfect balancing, but GT4 just feels a little bit too frustrating at times. Like, it just feels a little bit broken in some places. It's still a good game, though. I still think it's a really fun game, but it definitely feels a little bit, but the tone is definitely a little different here. Time Splitters 2. This was one of the hardest games I ever finished. I actually just beat this the other day, and I think this game is really good, but it is hard. Like, hard as fuck. This is one of the hardest games I've ever finished because there are certain stages that are just straight up bullshit hard, like the Robot Factory, possibly what I'd consider the worst in the entire game because they throw so many big robots at you and they shoot a bunch of bigger weapons at you like rockets and lasers, and the worst part is they almost never miss. Like, anywhere you go on the map, they will hurt you with almost no effort whatsoever. Like, even if you're far away from them, they can still rip you a new one pretty quickly. And not only that, there's only one checkpoint with each stage, which it works for most of them, but some of the stages are like really long, and with just one checkpoint, it's not enough for certain stages. And the aiming is also pretty bad. It's really awkward to control. But even with those flaws, though, I still think this is a really fun game. Bearing in mind a few hiccups here and there, but it's still a good game, and I still enjoyed this. It's just very difficult. Shadow Hearts Covenant, which I actually just recently started playing a couple of days ago, and so far I'm really liking it. It's a pretty good RPG. The tone is a lot different from the first game, which the first one was much more horror-like. This one has has some horror elements, but for the most part, the tone is a little bit the tone is a little lighter, and it's not as dark and as intense as the previous game. But it's still fun, though. I actually really like this game quite a bit. Next, I have Tenchu Wrath of Heaven, which is a really fun action-adventure stealth game where you play as a few different ninjas to go through, and basically you're just stealth killing other ninjas for to try and reach a goal. Linear, but really fun, though, and fairly open-ended. I enjoyed this game quite a lot. It has a few issues, though. The camera is not good. It's really awkward. The camera control is really awkward. Like, the camera sometimes tends to snag in areas where you don't want it to. And the combat is not exactly the best. It's not bad, but it's very awkward. It can be a bit awkward sometimes. But it is a lot of fun, though. I highly recommend checking it out. I also noticed that in Wrath of Heaven, the audio quality is kind of compressed, which is really weird. I thought they would have actually bettered that. The music sounds good, but the voices and sound effects just sound compressed. But I still think this is a great game, though. It's not super expensive. I think I got mine for like 15, 20 bucks. Great game. I highly recommend checking it out. Gran Turismo 3, love this game to death. And while I do criticize GT4 for being really frustrating, I feel like GT3 it's hard, but it's fair. Like, it feels more fair for the most part compared to 4. But I love this game. I played this a lot when I was a kid, and to this day, I still absolutely love this game. It's just an amazing racing game. Timeless classic through and through. It has aged incredibly well. But then here's a game that's not aged incredibly well, and that's Grand Theft Auto 3. I do like this game. I want to say this now. I actually do enjoy playing this one, but I can't deny it has problems. Like, this game has definitely not aged gracefully compared to the later games. I mean, cars break down pretty freaking easy. The game also doesn't really look that great anymore. It was mind-blowing for the time, but nowadays it just looks kind of bad. The radio stations are okay, but they are not really anything to write home about, honestly. Some of the missions just take way too freaking long, and they drag, but I do think it is a pretty solid game for the most part. It has its issues, but it's still a good game. Gauntlet Dark Legacy. I really enjoyed this game. I thought it was a really fun 4-player action hack and slash game. Although I think it only... Oh yeah, it actually does have 4-player functionality. But this is a great game. I really enjoyed it, especially playing this with friends. I haven't finished it, though, but it's a great game. Aliens vs. Predator Extinction. I enjoyed this game. It's a pretty good strategy game. Although it has a bit of a steep learning curve. It takes a little bit of time to get used to. But once you really work with it, it is a lot of fun. And being a fan of both franchises, of course this was right up my alley. Robotech Battlecry, which is a third-person action-adventure game with some shooting mechanics. For what I've played, it's pretty alright. Not a bad game. SSX3, which is a fantastic snowboarding game. I really enjoyed this. A little bit of The tricks are a little difficult to pull off at first, but once you really get used to it, it becomes a lot of fun. I highly recommend checking this game out. Great soundtrack, too. Got a nice mix of rock, techno, and hip-hop. Speaking of hip-hop, Def Jam Vendetta. I do not have Fight for New York, and there's a reason for that, because Fight for New York is obscenely fucking expensive. But Vendetta, though, is a pretty fun game. I enjoy this one quite a bit. Maybe it might not be as good as Fight for New York, but I still really enjoy the hell out of this game. It's got a bunch of different classic hip-hop artists here, like DMX, Ludacris, Method Man, Scarface, and a bunch of others. It's just a really fun game, and I highly recommend checking this out. Also, get it before it gets too expensive. I got my copy for about 35 bucks. Champions of Norath. I love this game. Very fun. Very fun action RPG. Plays a lot like the Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance series. In fact, it's actually developed by the same guys that made those games, Snowblind Studios, so that's pretty cool. Next, I have Mad Maestro, which I actually haven't even played yet. I don't know why, I just haven't, honestly. Next, I have Space Channel 5, which I also haven't played yet. Yeah, not much else I can say here. Star Ocean Till the End of Time. I have been meaning to play this. I mean, I love the second story on the PS1. I think that's a very fun RPG. And I actually do like The Last Hope, even though I know a lot of people hated it. And I liked Integrity of Faithlessness as well. But I have not played this one yet. I do plan on it, though. Some say it's a terrible game. I want to see for myself. Also, I noticed this is actually one of the few PS2 games that actually has more than one disc, which is kind of interesting. And I'm guessing it's probably a game disc. It's probably just so damn big. But, yeah, from what... I really do want to give this a shot. Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2. I absolutely love this game. Not quite as much as 3, but still a really good fighting game. Played the hell out of this one with my buddies. Just so good, especially multiplayer. Super Dragon Ball Z. This one is more of a traditional fighting game than it is a Budokai or even a Tenkaichi game. Like, it's much more stripped down, back to basics fighting, which I feel this was actually the best Dragon Ball Z game that did this, at least up until Fighters, which went to a Guilty Gear style, and I think this actually worked the best, but before Fighters, this was the essential traditional Dragon Ball Z fighter, and I honestly think this game is pretty good. Not amazing, but a pretty good fighting game, though. It's quite fun. It does kind of remind me of the Street Fighter games a bit. A little bit of, not Killer Instinct. Well, it kind of reminds me more of Street Fighter anyway, but I really enjoyed this game. I actually had quite a bit of fun with it, even if it is a little bit more stripped down in comparison to the Tenkaichi games. But I don't mind that it went to a more back-to-basics approach, so yeah, pretty decent game. Wild Arms 3, which I'm actually currently playing right now. This is a great RPG. I love the music, I love the graphics. I actually love the battle system as well. It's a really fun game. I'm not really the biggest fan of how healing items are handled, because healing items are incredibly freaking scarce to go through. Like, you can get, like, status healing. Like, you can get all sorts of items that can cure status ailments. Antidotes, and all that, but unfortunately, healing items for health, though, is very scarce. Which is weird, because usually in most RPGs, you'd find those aplenty at other stores. Wild Arms 3, on the other hand, not so much, but it's still a great game, though. I enjoyed the hell out of it, especially with its amazing soundtrack. The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, really good movie-based game. A lot of them are generally not very good, but this is actually one of the better ones. I enjoy this one quite a bit. Activision Anthology, which includes a bunch of Activision games, a lot of Atari 2600 games, and it's pretty fun. I enjoyed this one quite a bit. I know Atari 2600 games didn't really age the greatest, but there is something about them that I just really enjoy. Maybe it's the simplicity. Who knows? Cold Winter. I haven't really played much of this. I've only played like 20 minutes of it. And I can't say much about it, honestly. I've heard it's actually pretty good, though. Bakugan Battle Brawlers, which I actually loved the TV show growing up when I was a kid. I don't really play this one anymore, but I still have it. So yeah. It's not a bad game, though. I have played it several times. I think it's a pretty decent game. But I'm definitely not really much into Bakugan anymore. I've kind of grown out of it a bit, if I'm being honest. Next game I have is probably my biggest crowning jewel for the system, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. And before you say anything, yes, this is a real copy. And yeah, it was not cheap. I paid like $170 for this damn game. It was expensive as hell. But I do think it was worth it. Just to be able to have a game like this in my collection. And I've always wanted to have this, and I always wanted to play it. So I got it, played it, and I love this game. It's a really good fighting game. Played it in the arcades quite a bit, and then the PS2 version is a really good conversion. The Dreamcast version is also really good, although the Dreamcast version does look a little bit better. Like the Dreamcast version is a little bit more vivid and a little bit brighter, but the PS2 version is still a really good way to play this game, even though it is very fucking expensive. But I highly recommend this game, although I would say just emulate it, because it is not easy to get your hands on in this day and age. Capcom vs. SNK 2. So good. One of my favorite fighting games on the PS2, a damn good 2D fighting game with some great 3D backdrops. Loads of characters, great music. Honestly, it's so damn good. I actually do prefer it a little bit over the first game, but the first game still holds a special place in my heart, and I still think it stands on its own, so yeah, I love it. Time Splitters Future Perfect. This is one of my favorite games ever. I love this game to death. Not just on PS2, but just one of my favorite games in general. I love this game so damn much. I mean, it looks good, plays good, it runs very smoothly. It is what I consider nearly future perfect. I honestly love this game to death. It's got, unlike the previous game, it actually does fix a lot of issues. The aiming is much better this time. The checkpoints are a little more generous, so it's not as frustrating or even bullshit hard. Like, there may have been one or two stages where it did kind of get a little bit too ridiculous, but for the most part, it's actually a lot more fair this time around, and it's just more fun, in my opinion, because of it. Not that 2 is bad, no, I still think Time Splitters 2 is a great game, but Future Perfect, in my opinion, is just a little bit better. I know some may disagree with me on this, but I really do love this game, and even after playing through the single-player campaign, it's still really fun to play the multiplayer with other people. Especially just recently, I played this one with my sister, and we had a good time. It's a really fun game. I highly recommend you give this a shot. If you're into shooters, definitely get Time Splitters Future Perfect, or even Time Splitters 2. GoldenEye Rogue Agent, which I loved when I was younger, but playing it now, it's a lot slower than I remember. It feels really weird to control. Spider-Man 2, and I also have Spider-Man 1 as well, because I don't have a case for Spider-Man 1. Spider-Man 1 is pretty good, but not the best. Spider-Man 2, on the other hand, though, is an excellent game. I played this from start to finish numerous times, still love it. I got pretty far in the first game, but I got stuck at a certain point where you had to beat up a bunch of robots, and I couldn't figure out what the hell I was supposed to do, but I was like 11, 12 at the time, so I didn't really know what to do. But both games are pretty fun, but 2 is a lot better, for sure. Echo the Dolphin, Defender of the Future. I haven't played this one yet. Killzone. I haven't played this one yet either, but I've heard it's pretty good. I've played Killzone 2, though. And Killzone 2 is okay, but I wasn't the biggest fan of the aiming. I always found it to be kind of... Well, not really the aiming. The aiming's fine. Just, I found Killzone 2 to be kind of frustrating because most of the enemies you try to kill are freaking damage sponges, and I'm not really a big fan of that. Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I haven't played this one. Frequency. I love this game, and it's one of the few games I've actually 100% completed all the way through. It is such an amazing game. Great soundtrack. Just a really fun music rhythm game. With simple gameplay, but it's simple but fun to master. It's like a hard game to master, and it's still fun even with its difficulty. I think it's just one of those games that's just a ton of fun regardless of its difficulty. Like, easy to play but hard to master, and I feel that's what really makes me want to continue playing, and I love this game. It's just so good. Last game I'm going to show before I end this video is Star Wars Battlefront 2. A fantastic third-person shooter with great multiplayer and single-player campaigns. Good stuff. So good. And that is part 1 of my PS2 collection. I still have a lot more to show, so stay tuned.